Thoughts?
A little sad. You know, he's had such a huge impression. He made such a huge impression in the time he's been in the Premier League, from French football to a huge club like Arsenal. We all wondered, you and I sat over 20 years ago and thought, this will never work. He's got no chance. And he virtually transformed the early part of the Premier League. He was almost the Pep Guardiola of his time, Richard. So a little sad, a little surprised at the timing, but I think maybe Arsene said, well, if I'm going, I'd like people to know. And he might just use it as a little farewell tour for the last 4 games.
beIN Sports sources understand that Wenger has recommended that Patrick Vieira replace him. The board, we understand, are split down the middle on that advice. Others want to go a different route. Would Vieira be the man?
I think it's difficult to know who would be the man. And I think what the board need to decide, Richard, is what do we do? Do we go for like? Do we go for someone who has the same values in his football and his philosophy as Arsene Wenger? If we do, then maybe it's not Patrick, although he played for him. Maybe Patrick plays a little differently. Maybe somebody like a Brendan Rodgers, we know what kind of football he liked to play, it would be more inclined to be thought of. Maybe one of the Dutch coaches, like Koeman or Laudrup, who play football in a certain way that's very like Arsenal, maybe they would be in.
There's a very strong German backroom team there already. Does that make a German a contender?
Well, there's a couple of names, isn't there? Tuchel, whose name has been linked with Paris Saint-Germain recently. He's linked with it. And the RB Leipzig.
Nagelsmann.
No. Tuchel as well, Nagelsmann, but there's also the kid from RB Leipzig.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Who's also been linked with it this morning, I see. So that there's every reason why we're looking at that and thinking, OK, you bring in German backroom staff, why? Maybe they're going to go that way, we shall see.
Shame he's been hounded out for me.
You think he's been hounded?
I do. I think it's a sorry and the wrong end for Arsene Wenger. In a way, I wish he'd gone a year ago on a high with his FA Cup. But there is still the Europa League, and as he said, he's determined yet to turn this season into a success. So,
well, it's going to be tough. I mean, I'd love him to go out in the high. I'd love him to win the Europa League and put Arsenal back in the Champions League, where he's basically kept him as a permanent fixture in the 22 years he's been there. It would be nice, but they've got it all on against Atletico Madrid.
And Carrie Brown is at Arsenal's training ground for us right now. Carrie, just exactly what's happening down there?
Welcome here to Arsenal's training ground, where simply everyone, club officials, there are tears, players in absolute shock. No one expected this. The players were in the meeting room this morning. Arsene Wenger came in and delivered the news. He said, I have bad news for you. I'm leaving the club at the end of the season, but he made it clear that he's enjoyed his time here, but they have an opportunity to go out and win the Europa League and enjoy glory in his last season. It was a rallying call in the dressing room. I spoke to players and they said everyone was looking at each other. No one knew what to say. And then their captain, Per Mertesacker, stood up and encouraged the players to go and put on a performance befitting of their greatest manager at Arsenal Football Club and take and guide this team to glory in the Europa League. I asked players what was said after Mertesacker and Wenger talked. They said nothing. In fact, after Wenger had left the room, the only noise was of chairs scraping as players left. They were in shock. This is an Arsenal media day. beIN Sports were here to sit down with Mesut Ozil. We got the information just as he came to talk to us, and I have to say, fair credit to Mesut Ozil, because he had the option not to do the interview after the shocking news. He did sit down with us. He didn't want to talk directly about it. He said, I need 24 hours for this news to sink in. I've seen other players, they've told me they're shocked. They don't want to talk on the record about Arsene Wenger because they want the narrative to be his. But Mesut Ozil did talk generically to us about the special moments being those FA Cup wins. Let's not forget that Arsene Wenger is the most successful manager in FA Cup history in the modern era. He also, of course, led the Invincibles. Mesut Ozil spoke about those special moments, the celebrations in the dressing rooms and the rallying conversations and talks that Arsene Wenger would give his teams in the dressing room in an FA Cup final. I said, Mesut, you can now tell us about those. And he said, no, the rules are what goes on in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. The players here are still stunned. There are tears, there are shocks, Per Mertesacker has been talking as a captain on Arsenal's Facebook Live. He said that he owes most of his career to Arsene Wenger, the way he's guided him, and this whole team need to now come and give a performance in tribute to Arsene Wenger. And this is probably the best way, isn't it? The best ending. We all feared that it could get poisonous, but now Arsene Wenger gets to give his long goodbye. And what a goodbye it would be, winning a European Cup, a trophy he's not yet won in his career. Lots of tributes, but Per Mertesacker saying a great manager, but also now a chance to look forward to a new positive future if a new manager could come in and create new histories. So yes, Arsene Wenger, a great man and great tributes, but soon a look to a new future here at Arsenal. Back to you.
Thank you, Carrie. You can imagine the shock there this morning, can't you?
Absolutely, 100%. A club that's known stability for 22 years suddenly wakes up this morning with no idea who's going to be its new coach. What a job, though, by the way.
By the way, the favourite for that job has changed 3 times in the last 25 minutes.
Exactly.
Eddie Howe is now the favourite.
That's a shout.
John Cross is the Daily Mirror's chief football writer, Arsenal fan, of course. I'm going to let Andy ask the first question.
Right, John, at last, have you finally driven Arsene away?
Guys, what are we going to talk about from now on?
See, now you're panicking. You've been wanting rid of him for years and now you're panicking.
Honestly, what a tremendous day. I do think that basically Arsenal and Wenger have done exactly the right thing, because I think as great as Wenger has been, I think it's coming to an end. That's obvious. And I do think now it should be that everyone gets behind Arsenal and Arsene for the final weeks of the season.
beIN Sports sources, John, have indicated to us that he's told the board that he believes Patrick Vieira is the right man to replace him. We also understand they're split on that advice. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think personally, listen, I think from what I know, I do feel that Arsenal have made this decision together with Wenger now. And that basically they've done it very specifically, on the one hand, to obviously galvanise everyone behind the team, but also it's because when you inevitably, as a football club, make approaches to managers, as Arsenal will be doing now, word gets out. And that would have undermined and destabilised, I think, Wenger and upset him and upset the equilibrium at a very stable club. But now I feel that they've got that decision to make. Look, from what I know, I think the club would look to get a more experienced manager at this point than Patrick Vieira. It's all about perception, isn't it? Because I tell you what, whenever I've mentioned Mikel Arteta, for example, and said, oh, it's probably a job too soon for him, I've been quickly shot down by people I trust and know, saying, well, I'm not so sure about that. He's making great inroads. So I wouldn't close the door on Vieira or Arteta completely, but I do feel that inference there, that the club, rather than Wenger, is looking for someone a little bit more experienced, I think is what I'm hearing. I think they'll be looking at Joachim Löw. I think that Leonardo Jardim at Monaco is a chance. And then also I think on the short list is Brendan Rodgers at Celtic.
John, you know what I find, John, what I find a little strange, you're trotting out all these names, and Arsenal must have had a fair idea that it was going this year, and themselves. I'm getting the impression that they've no idea who they want. There's so many names.
They've not decided yet, Andy.
I'm staggered with that.
Listen, I think it's clear that every club, when they make a huge decision like that, would have a direction they want to go in.
Yes.
But from my understanding is that basically they've tried to do it now in April, so they give themselves a bit of breathing space so they can make the right choice. What I would say is, I mean, you could throw in Luis Enrique into the mix if you like, or a couple of young German managers.
Listen, I'm available, John. Throw my name in.
Well, listen, Andy, no one's come close to replicating your knowledge on tactics. So let's be honest here. It's almost let's just say far sort of management techniques from Wenger for many years. So I do think they need a complete contrast. They need to go someone young, vibrant, and someone who's very tactical aware, someone who buys into the system. What I would say is that in previous years, I wouldn't have had a great deal of confidence that they'll make the right appointment. But they have a structure now at the club with, sort of various people behind the scenes, and they've made good appointments. Sven Mislintat, head of recruitment. They've taken the former Barcelona director of football. And I do think that sort of they've got good guys now making the right choices. And I do feel that they're well positioned now to make that choice. I think as of the other day, I know well-placed people who have just not given anything away to them, and my feeling is they haven't made that final decision yet, but they've made the final decision on Wenger to allow themselves that breathing space to make that right choice. And I'm sure they'll make it quickly, but I do think that they've done the Wenger decision now to get the successor right and to get the successor in quickly.